Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Narcos Season 3. In this video, I'll give my overall review of Narcos Season 3 as a whole, so I have to start with a spoiler warning for Narcos up to the end of Season 3. If you haven't seen all of Season 3 of Narcos, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, if you haven't seen any of Narcos and would like my thoughts on the show spoiler-free, you can check out my quick review of Narcos Seasons 1 and 2. I'll leave a link to that video in the description below. This video, however, will feature spoilers for Season 3 of Narcos from now on. So I remember when Season 2 came out, many were questioning their decision to kill off Pablo Escobar, or what I mean is show up to his death, because obviously the show is based off of real life events, so no one was expecting them to change history and show Pablo Escobar survive, but many were expecting them to spend more time to get to his death. But I personally disagree with this criticism, as I feel the show moved at a perfect pace, and had they stretched out the story anymore, it would have become a bit tiresome. So I thought it was a brave decision to arrive at Pablo Escobar's death in Season 2, and I thought it paid off in spades. However, there are also many who expected the show to end in Season 2, as after all, Pablo Escobar was always the main focus of the show, and the one character people found most fascinating. And so many were skeptical when it was announced there'd be at least 2 more seasons of Narcos. Some even believed that these next seasons would feel empty without Escobar, and they would pale in comparison. But again, I disagreed. I felt there was no reason for the show to end, as I always found the show to be about the drug trade overall and not dependent on any one character. So I knew coming into Season 3 that it would switch focus from Escobar to the Cali Cartel, who did appear in previous seasons of Narcos, but they were more of side characters. And I thought it was a bold move for a show to kill off its main character and then make a bunch of supporting characters the main focus of the show. But of course it makes a difference when it's based off of real life events, because in those events Pablo Escobar did die, and the Cali Cartel then became the main focus of the drug trade, to which the world turned its focus on. So in that sense it made sense for the show, but still it was a bold decision for a TV show, one that many didn't think could be pulled off. But once again, Narcos proved these concerns wrong by providing another high-quality season just as good as the others that came before it. Now, I myself watched Seasons 1 and 2 back-to-back, and these seasons blend seamlessly together as they tell basically one story. So in my mind, I had problems differentiating the two of them, whereas Season 3 has a bold difference, as not only does it switch focus from Pablo Escobar to the Cali Cartel, it also drops the main DEA character, Steve Murphy, who served as the show's narrator, to that of his partner, Javier Pena, played by Pedro Pascal, who in previous seasons was simply a supporting character, and now he became the show's main DEA character and the narrator in Season 3. Now, many actually praised this move, some even going as far to say that this made Season 3 better than the 2 previous seasons, but I have to disagree with this as well. I know that people always complained about Steve Murphy, in particular his narration, that many described as too on the nose and unnecessary, but I always disagreed with this as well, and I actually really liked Steve Murphy and his narrations and thought it brought a lot to the show, but I wasn't necessarily unhappy with the decision to drop Murphy and focus on Pena, but I thought it could have been handled a little bit better. I would have liked it if there had been a cameo by Murphy at the start of the season when Pena was in America. Maybe he could have come up and wished him well and gave him some parting advice or something like that. But as it was, they didn't even mention Murphy, nor any of Pena's previous events in the previous 2 seasons. I thought, at the very least, if they were going to have a cameo, they could have at least mentioned him. In fact, In many ways, there seemed to be very little connection to Javier Pena of this season to that of Javier Pena of previous seasons. They could have easily just created a new character to fill this role, and there would have been very little difference. That being said, I'm glad that they did leave Pedro Pascal as the main character, because I thought always thought he was a great actor, and I think he deserved to be the new lead. I just wish that they had a greater connection to previous seasons. Now, one might say that they are staying true to real-life events, as in real life Steve Murphy retired shortly after Escobar's death. However, in real life, Javier Pena had nothing to do with the events depicted in Season 3. In fact, I do get the feeling that overall Season 3 is playing very fast and loose with real-life history, and only staying true to the most bare-bone events. I'd call it an almost Braveheart style of being historically accurate, although perhaps that's being a bit too harsh. The showrunner himself referred to Season 3 as having a 50-50 split between fiction and reality, and stated they tried to stay true to real-life events as much as possible, stating that even when they fictionalized something, they tried to write it in a way that was true to the real-life characters and the way things would have went down. But you know what? I'm perfectly fine with that, as we are presented with a highly entertaining, well put together, and thrilling story that features some of the best storytelling a show could have. So just like Braveheart, I have no issue with the show's decision to take a bit of artistic license regarding historical accuracy. So I did like Season 3 just as much as the previous two seasons. In fact, I have a hard time ranking these seasons or saying which one I like better, because I pretty much love them all. And while I do have some issues on how clunky the transition in this new storyline was handled, there were always also so many benefits on switching focus that made Season 3 more fresh and in some ways more interesting than the two previous seasons, as unlike Seasons 1 and 2, the show was no longer focused on one kingpin, but a group of kingpins, so it became less of a criminal study like Scarface or Breaking Bad, and more of an over-encompassing ensemble show, and I really liked that change. It kept things fresh and interesting. In fact, arguably the character Season 3 focused on the most isn't one of the Cali Cartel kingpins, but the security chief of the Cali Cartel, who became a DEA informant, Jorge Salcido. And this character was definitely one of the high points of the season. I'd probably go as far as to say that he was the most interesting character of the season, because although Jorge was involved with the ruthless drug cartel, he himself was presented more as the everyman who was just trapped in a bad situation. And you followed his journey as he tried to convince his family everything was fine, until being confronted with the reality that he may never be allowed to leave the drug life peacefully and quietly like he wanted to, which led to him working with the DEA to take down the Cali Cartel, as he found that to be his only way out. And this is the character you definitely identify with the most from the start of the season, when he's presented as the spy master, like head of what is referred to in the show as the Cali KGB, but presents the human side of him, and then later you understand his reasoning for turning to the DEA and wanting to help them. One of the more interesting aspects of the season to me was at the end, when they failed to arrest Miguel Rodriguez. The U.S. ambassador tells Pena that they could go in and just rescue the informant and forget about everything else, but Pena outright lies to his agents and says that the only way to get Jorge and his family out safely is to arrest Miguel. This was interesting, as it does make Pena come off as the asshole, and it shows that unlike his agents, his priority wasn't the safety of their informant, but rather the capture of the Cali Cartel godfathers, and he was willing to put Jorge's life at risk to further this goal, and I love the dynamic here. However, the Cali Cartel kingpins were certainly interesting characters unto themselves. In fact, the show does an amazing job of fleshing out the different characters. In the previous seasons, these characters barely appeared, and thus you didn't really get any sense of them. But this season, Each of the four of them were very distinct and interesting characters that you really got a feel for and wanted to know more about. And that certainly made the season that much more interesting. Also, it made the ending where they were defeated a lot more satisfying. But speaking of the ending, let's talk about the big revelation that the president, and in fact, like the whole government, was on the payroll of the Cali cartel. I love the storyline. I thought it played out amazingly well. It made everything else that happened in retrospect make so much sense, and why they were met with so much resistance when going after the Cali cartel, because the whole government was against them. And I love how Pena was able to expose them and and thus ruin the Cali cartel Godfather's perfect plan for surrender. I thought that played out very nicely, and I loved the return of the CIA character with his smug sense of superiority, because he knew from the start that the cards were stacked against Pena, and it was so satisfying to see Pena get the better of him. And the way it ended, that focused on them getting the accountant, was also very nicely done and extremely suspenseful, with just the right touch of comedy, as the accountant himself was extremely naive. And also, this wouldn't be a good gangster story without some good old-fashioned turf war, which we got in the form of the Cali cartel going to war with a fellow rival, where bad blood existed between them. And I thought this worked extremely well for the overall story. It never felt like a distraction and really added to the texture of the show. In fact, I love how David almost caught up to the DEA, but was then gunned down by his rivals before he could get to them, and made for some great storytelling. But now let me get to the negatives of the season, and admittedly there were very few, and the ones that were there were overshadowed by how great the season was. However, the one storyline that didn't quite do it for me was the storyline with Maria Salazar, whose husband was killed by Pancho at the start of the season, and then she started a sort of love affair with Miguel in order to stay wealthy. This storyline did feel like a distraction and was ultimately not very interesting, and I don't think it was worth the payoff at the end, and I feel the show could have done without it, but that's a very minor thing. So my rating for Narcos Season 3 out of 10 is a 9 excellent. Another amazing season of Narcos that proves that the show still has it, whether it's focusing on one notorious drug lord or a group of them. The show is still capable of telling a great story at a good pace that never feels boring or like filler at any point, and is always an amazing thrill ride to enjoy, filled with fascinating, fully fleshed out characters brought to life by amazing acting and realistic writing, making Narcos still one of the best crime shows, or films for that matter, to ever exist, in my humble opinion. Despite the accolades that this show gets, I still feel that it is severely underrated. So that's it for my review of Narcos Season 3. Be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover many upcoming shows, as well as doing videos on other shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.